Simply Secured, Elevating Cyber Careers is a podcast dedicated to the telling of real stories of cybersecurity practitioners. They are on the ground solving problems, leading teams, and building secure systems. Hosted by James McQuiggan at 35,000 feet, each episode features a honest, engaging conversation with someone whose work in cybersecurity might not make headlines, but makes a real impact. Hello there, and welcome to Simply Secured. I'm your host, James McQuiggan, at 35,000 feet, and this week we sit down with Luke Canfield as he shares his path into cybersecurity and his interest in hardware tinkering and drones. Luke shares with us how he prioritizes vulnerabilities in systems, the significance of writing detailed reports, and the challenges faced in vulnerability management. And we also talk about the emerging threats involving drones in cyber warfare and the future role of AI and open source intelligence. I'm excited that you're here, and please make sure you subscribe to the Simply Cyber Media Group. And it would be great for me, this podcast, and all of our guests if you could hit that like button, that little thumbs up, and please make sure to leave a comment or question below, as I love to hear from all of you who are listening. So welcome aboard, and make sure you're comfortably seated as we get ready to take off, and I hope you enjoy this conversation that we have with Luke Canfield.
I'm Luke Canfield. A lot of you probably know me from the Simply Cyber morning chats or in Discord. My name's LC3. I am a vulnerability management analyst, or I was until January. And since then, I have been working on drones.
Ready for takeoff.
So welcome to the show, Luke. Real excited that you're here. One of the questions I like to ask everybody coming onto the show, rather than go through your history, for me, I want to know, Luke, what was your aha moment? What was that light bulb that went off when you realized that cybersecurity was a path that you wanted to pursue?
That's kind of just one for me because it was something I was tracking to do like 20 years ago, and things just didn't work out. And I ended up doing GIS for a while through college, which turned into data management. And then I came across the Raspberry Pi in, I think, 2015. And that's kind of where I got back into it. Hardware tinkering, just seeing what I could do that I used to do with it.
Very cool. You mentioned an acronym there. I'm not sure if our audience is aware, but what's GIS?
Geographic Information Systems. For visualizing like spatial information, making maps, statistics.
Very cool. Gotta love a good map maker. So when, a lot of folks, and you've probably run into them and we see them, but we have a lot of people that want to break into cybersecurity these days. What was it that gave you the interest that made you want to go be in cybersecurity? And what advice would you give to people that want to get into cybersecurity?
20 years ago, it was just breaking things and then trying to put it back together, or putting it back together the way I think it should have worked. More recently, it was being a program manager for a cyber team. And I actually sat with that team, and it just got to talking to them about what all they're doing. And it's like, oh, I recognize everything you're talking about. And I would rather talk to you than vendors.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. Well, I work for a vendor myself, but I certainly understand that perspective there overall. Sad to hear that you're still now looking for work, but out of work since January. But you had done vulnerability management for a number of years. So what I'm curious to know is, how do you prioritize the vulnerabilities in a particular system? And then what frameworks or criteria helped you with that decision-making when you were doing the vulnerability analysis? So curious about frameworks, guidelines, and how did you prioritize?
Prioritizing, how long would it take? If it takes longer than an hour, automate it. For the risk, how widespread is it? How many vulnerabilities are popping up in our systems? Do we have 500 mediums and like 100 criticals? And are they actually criticals? and then doing my reporting on what could be done the fastest and the least painful.
That's one of the things that a lot of folks don't realize when it comes to vulnerability management, the writing of reports. And that's certainly the case there with doing vulnerability management. When you were working with regards to the different vulnerability management programs, either where you worked or prior places, what challenges did you face? What obstacles did you come across a lot of the times when doing that? And then how did you deal with those?
A lot of the times, the issue was there's some update pushed either in the scanning software, which I used a lot of like Tenable, Nessus, Tanium, and that would break the configurations on a lot of like older systems that hadn't received any updates yet. They wouldn't scan. I'd be like, why am I getting only 10 systems reporting when I know I have 1,000? And issues mostly regarding that, or someone updated something without putting in like proper change requests at like a project site or something.
Yeah, when change management is extremely important that we know within organizations. And when they forget to put the ticket in, that can always be a problem overall. You had in your intro, you mentioned about drones, and I remember seeing one of your presentations regarding drones. So I want to kind of ask you your thoughts with regards to how did you become involved with drones, and is there what cybersecurity tie-ins have you had with them?
Drones, I've been following because my former career plan in another life was go military, do 20 years, that stuff. Got into drones following like the military tech, like the early 2000s. And when I got into geography and GIS, I had to take a remote sensing class. And that dealt a lot with satellites, scanning using like IR, electromagnetic spectrum stuff. And one of the grad students, she had done a presentation. She'd actually gone over to Africa with a DJI Phantom 3, I think. This would have been 2012 or something. She used it to map the like open pit mines where people were mining diamonds by hand, and like made a really detailed 3D model just using a consumer drone. And I've been following drone stuff since then. And with the everything going on in Ukraine, drones kind of just blew up everywhere because like everything just kind of had an intersection, like 3D printing, cheap parts, online communities, open shared knowledge. And I also back to Ukraine. A lot of stuff we're seeing in Ukraine, like there are cyber applications for drones, especially with like jamming. And there's been a few reports even over here. I think there's one in New York, I think a few years ago, where someone had two drones and used one to break into a business's wireless network. It had like had a pineapple on it, not an actual pineapple, for clarification. It relaying the information off of another drone to give it a longer range. Well, drones now have a lot more range, and you can slap a Raspberry Pi and automate a lot of the stuff for like breaching into a Wi-Fi network.
So now we've got to be not only when we see a drone, we got to look to make sure there's not a Raspberry Pi on it. Otherwise, it could be somebody trying to red team their way into an organization. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yes, believe someone over at TCM Security had a project on that. I couldn't find it again, but they shared it on LinkedIn.
Do you see this as like an emerging cyber threat where you've got drones that are going to target organizations, or is this kind of a one-off where it may not be as common?
My personal opinion is we're going to see a lot more stuff involving drones in the next decade. Ukraine, in my opinion, it was like what World War One did with like airplanes, machine guns, and tanks. It just developed the tech like a decade and a few years.
Where do you envision kind of that future of drone and cyber technology?
It's going to be open source and it's going to be DIY. if a guy in a trench in a Connex box with a 3D printer and what used to be everything you'd find in a Radio Shack as far as like antennas and components, like if he can build it in that trench in a war zone, I can build it here in my office.
Yeah, so we certainly know that through technology, through the open source, it's going to be very easy for people to start creating these, especially in a warfare type environment as well. But also, I think in red teams as well. So that's certainly going to be very interesting. Now, I think also in your drone presentation, you did a little bit of OSINT work with that as well. You were flying over certain locations and had some pictures, and you were asking all of us to figure out where it came from. I remember that, and I struggled with that. What When it comes to OSINT, what is it that kind of sparked your interest in open source intelligence?
So OSINT goes back to that life 20 years ago. I did an international studies degree at WVU, there was a subtrack for intelligence and national security. And most of the instructors were former or on loan, like agency guys from Office of Naval Intelligence, FBI. And I did a course on OSINT. Like it was just like a 300 level course. It was just on OSINT. And back then, when Facebook and Twitter, even though it wasn't that mature yet, you could just pull data and make these like social network maps. And I looked at one for myself, and it had everything in the nodes from like high school, Marshall University, WVU, the Army, what Army unit I was in, where people would just overshare information. Like you could just break down everything into like a web map.
So is there any particular tools or applications or services you like to use in OSINT, especially when it comes to the global mapping?
The global mapping, one of the best ones is Google Earth. And there's a few there you can look at the images and where the shadows and actually see what time of day, time of year it is.
That gets real interesting. So have you ever done any of the GeoGuessr?
Yes, I got into that a little bit last fall after Deadwood.
Very cool. Successful, not successful? How did you feel you were doing?
Some were, it was pretty hit or miss. Like there's some pretty hard ones on there. It's like, I have no clue where that could be. And then there's like, someone will break down later on, like someplace else says, oh, there's like a tiny like rock there that gave the whole location away. It's like, well, it's rock.
I'm not a geologist, right?
I took a few classes, but I would not have noticed that rock.
That's interesting. Interesting. In my recent presentation I've done on AI and OSINT, and I saw an article, it was on ZDNet, where they talked about how ChatGPT, I think it's in the O3 model, can determine where the picture's taken. It's getting better at that geoguessing, essentially. So do we see that AI is going to be supporting a lot more applications and capabilities in OSINT? Are you seeing any of that?
I believe it will. Like it's just going to get better and more refined as people feed more data into it. Think Lenzo AI. It's kind of like Premise. I've used it a bit, and it has its flaws, but I did actually track down a guy through it using Lenzo AI, and it didn't make sense to me, like why hockey teams kept popping up with this. Like it wasn't a picture of this guy, but this guy happened to be like a minor league hockey player. Eventually, like everything clicked when it's like, wait, this guy's a hockey player. And then I went back to Lenzo and it's like, okay, well, this kept pulling hockey data. I think AI is just going to can't remember what it was, but I think it was 2023, like ChatGPT, like its capabilities doubled in 9 months. And I think we'll keep seeing that for a while. Everything contingent on GPUs, but yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. Where we had Moore's law every 18 months. Now we've got a new law for AI, how quick it's able to double its capabilities. And that number, 9 months, 7 months, it won't be too long, I think, before it's every few months it starts doubling and it gets really, really scary. You mentioned Deadwood, and of course, Deadwood, to our Team SC colleagues and those that may or may not know, but Deadwood is the home of the Wild West Hacking Fest. that happens pretty well every year in October. And you've been to those events in Secure West Virginia and probably some of the B sides as well. How have you found that those conferences help your professional growth?
One, networking. Networking's one of the biggest things. Like a few of the interviews I have had recently, I wouldn't have even had an in or even known about the job posting or the link or anything if I hadn't met people.
Yeah, and certainly networking goes a long way because you never know who you'll meet today that helps you get a job down the road. Yeah, no, certainly that's the case with so networking is a key factor there as well. Any other professional growth, any other concepts or things that you've learned from those different conferences, what people might be able to expect?
So, how I base if I think a conference is good or worth going to is that I have at least one spark or idea, even if it wasn't related to any of the talks I went to. One I came up with was utilizing AI for like organizing OSINT data, like templating and stuff from one talk on adversary, like threat actors using Chat GPT. I think that was B-Sides Greenville year before last. And I always I have a notebook in my pocket when I go to these. And if I even just have an idea, I just quickly scribble it down. So even if you go there, you're going to learn like tools, what someone else is doing. I heard one of the creators of the Red Team Village here in Raleigh's B-side, and he went over an entire thing about Rag and Raptor for using AI and like getting it honed down to what you're wanting it to do exactly. And there's another guy at the same one who is also somehow tied to Red Team Village who went over side channel attacks into AWS, like the S3 bucket, and then how to cover your tracks and create like like causing like a breach to go off to like just as a distraction, just using tokens and like where like machines talk to each other, like different applications. Is a entire thing on like supply chain attacks, and I think he went through GitHub and used that to sidechain into a instance of AW3, yeah, or AWS.
Fantastic. That's all. So what spark did you get from that then?
Supply chain attacks are going to be a problem when people keep plugging in everything to each other. So you might have 30 programs all feeding into each other, and they're just going to chain their way through and eventually get to where they want to go.
Yep. Yep. No, that's certainly a true statement there. We know that, supply chain is a big concern. And now you start adding in AI into that and it changes it overall.
And just how he did it, I never would have thought of that.
Cool. So going to the conferences, you get some good sparks, get some good ideas, but you learn what other people are doing and doing it in a different way, outside the box or a different aspect. That's awesome. And I agree. That's kind of what we look for when we go to these conferences, is to be able to have that spark and that different way of thinking overall. So we know you listen to the Daily Cyber Threat Brief, which is great because what Jerry shares with us every day on the stories from the CISO Master Series. But what else do you do to make sure you're staying current with the different cybersecurity threats, trends, developments? What would you recommend besides the Simply Cyber Daily Cyber Threat Brief? What other sources or resources do you recommend for folks getting into cyber or continuing in cyber?
I use Reader for setting up news feeds, like
Yep.
RSS feeds. And I just, anytime I find a site like ZDNet or Bleeping Computer or anything, I just have it feed into like a certain like folder for news that day. And surprisingly, Twitter, X, Lift on Security. I follow him. I follow all the big names like Krebs, stuff from like different companies. They usually put out their stuff. B-sides conferences, they sometimes put out information, so it's just trolling through data. Yeah. News stories, not every, and it's data, but it's weird to say that.
Yeah, no, it's great to be able to leverage Twitter because all the, people are posting all the time. And then RSS feeds, you need a way to be able to call all the different stories and go through and then see what piques your interest and then go read it. That's certainly
Medium's another good one. I just
Medium.
remember
Yeah.
that.
Medium's great. Medium Substack as well. I know a lot of folks like to use just because people are writing always all the time, and it's a good way to be able to get good information there. So are there any type of personal projects or initiatives, research initiatives that you're taking that now that you've got this extra time on your hands, unfortunately?
Yes, the drone projects I've been working on. I am applying a war driving setup using a Raspberry Pi and antennas and a GPS dongle. And I am going to slap it in a VTOL Stallion version 2 by Flytory drone, which is a fixed wing drone with decent range. And that is actually what I was working on right there before this. Because a lot of the drones that people have used before with the examples, they're quadcopters. Like they don't have that great of a range and they're kind of noisy. This takes off like a quadcopter and then converts into an airplane and flies, and they have longer range just because they can glide. And eventually I'll work on some other stuff past that after I set up a test environment in an area that's in the middle of nowhere with my own network to attack.
With the doing the work with the drones, doing the work with what you've done with OSINT and your vulnerability management experience, is there a particular type of role or organization that you're looking to get into to be able to leverage all that? Or is it just a matter of, I just need something so I can work?
It's a bit of both. I need something just so I can work, but ideally I would like to be in something that kind of deals with OSINT, intelligence, or drones. I like drones. So something along that lines. I know it's not really a huge market for physical red teaming anymore, since most of the niche is very small and very well known. Something research heavy. I like research. I actually like writing reports.
So vulnerabilities, cyber threat intelligence, those report writing and pen testing. When you're doing the red teaming, there's a lot of report, or purple teaming. We have a lot of those reports as well. Very cool. Okay, so now we get to the point, the part of the show that I like to call the rapid fire section. So we're going to start off, and what I'm curious to know is if cybersecurity is an animal, what would it be?
Badger.
Badger.
Go with badger.
All right, very cool. What would you say is your favorite word in cybersecurity?
Wishing.
What would you say is your least favorite word in cyber?
Patch.
Patch. There you go. So if you could fix one thing in cybersecurity, wave a magic wand and fix it, remove it, it never has to be a problem, what would that be?
If I could wave a magic wand and get rid of one thing, it would be redundant vendor products.
Redundant vendor products. All right, cool. So what would you say is your favorite cyber or OSINT tool?
Obsidian for note taking. Like I use Obsidian heavily with OSINT stuff that I'm doing or have done before. I think it's just a great multi-tool.
Very cool. All right. What would you say is your favorite cyber, OSINT, whatever book? Is there a particular book that you really enjoy that you've read?
Yeah, The Cuckoo's Egg.
Yep. Good book. Yep. What profession, other than what you've done, would you like to attempt? So something that's not in cyber, not in IT? What profession would you like to attempt?
I would say trucking just because the idea of driving and listening to audiobooks all day, a lot anyways. You fly everywhere. I drive everywhere. So I might as well be getting paid for it. It's kind of a joke. Actually, I wouldn't mind like owning like a bar or something in Florida.
What would you not ever want to do as a profession?
Working in a kitchen.
Been there, done that.
Yep. Been there, done that. Never want to do that.
Do that
anywhere close to it again.
Nothing wrong with that. All right, so this one gets a little creative. If there was a sandwich, the Luke Canfield, that was to be named after you, what would be in it? What would those ingredients be?
Oh, that's just called a Cuban sandwich. Also, that would just be a Reuben.
It could be sandwiches that are already out there. You just put your spin on it.
Oh, yeah, it'd be a double stacked Reuben, 3 pieces of bread, fresh pastrami. Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Now we kind of get a little serious here. If you had to delete all but 3 apps on your smartphone, which ones are you keeping? So which 3 apps would you keep on your smartphone and lose everything else?
Signal, Waze, and Spotify.
So music to listen to, how to get around, and communication. I love it. That's great. All right. This one can be people that are alive or people that have passed on. But if you could ask one person, one question, and they had to answer truthfully, who and what would you ask?
I'm not sure of their name, but I would ask who thought Windows 8 was a good idea.
We'll go with Bill Gates on that one. We could ask Bill or Steve Ballmer or one of those guys. That's awesome. I like that.
And why they're trying to remake it with Windows 11.
With Windows. Yeah, no kidding. So what is one place that you would love to fly to? Money, no object. You get to fly anywhere in the world. Where are you going?
Probably Ireland, Galway.
All right. So getting back to a little cybersecurity here, what would you say is the biggest threat that we're going to be facing in the next 10 years?
In the next 10 years, biggest threat, I'm going to say supply chain. It's going to be AI and targeting supply chain. And probably like what's old is new again, like everything we've seen with like ransomware, phishing. It's just going to be exacerbated by AI. Whenever quantum comes around next year, I've heard that forever. It's just going to be more of the same, but with AI. And I think when there's like more centralization of vendors and systems and like Cisco buying Splunk, Cisco buying anyone else, we're just going to see more centralization, and centralization usually causes more complications, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, I can certainly attest. Yeah, what goes around comes around. What's old is new again. Yep. Kind of as we wrap up here, and thanks for the great responses on the rapid fire questions, but the last question I have for you is what do you want your legacy to be in cybersecurity?
I would just like to contribute something that prevents something bad from happening. I've seen numerous instances of like hospitals being hit. Awareness. I like that I stopped someone from buying $1,000 in Apple gift cards a few years ago. Just generally raising awareness. Nothing grand.
Yep, that's fantastic. That's excellent. I think a lot of us want that as well. Be able to help people, which is, I think, a lot of the reasons why we're in this industry. Well, Luke, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you here today, and I'm looking forward to running into you at Simply CyberCon or Secure West Virginia or certainly Wild West Hackin' Fest later on this year in October. So to everybody, thanks again for tuning in this week for Simply Secured as we chatted with Luke Canfield, and thanks for stopping by.